Hey guys, so yes, the heir to the Samsung empire has been arrested on bribery charges in the Soon-sil Gate scandal. So Lee Jae-yong, he is the son of the chairman, Geun-hye of Samsung Group, and Geun-hye is in the hospital still in a coma after he had fallen ill, I think back in 2014. So his chairman position has essentially been transferred down to Lee Jae-yong. Lee Jae-yong, though, is not the CEO of Samsung Electronics. He is a vice chairman within the empire, but he is seen as essentially the head. The CEO essentially is just a hired position. He was also embroiled in this scandal, but he won't be arrested. So what does it mean if you're arrested? It basically means in this case you're detained. And you might have heard this term flying around with Lee Jae-yong not in jail. Essentially what happens is that the special prosecutors investigating this have to submit a request to basically keep Lee Jae-yong in jail. After questioning, if you're not in jail, you just get to go home. But if you are detained, then you have to be imprisoned while this whole process is going on. About a month ago, they tried to imprison Lee Jae-yong, but that request was denied. And back then, Samsung was essentially saying, hey, look, we might have given some money to Soon-sil and her foundations, but it was all for a good cause. We believed that this was philanthropy, and we were donating because this is supposed to help sports and supposed to help the nation. Well, the prosecutors revised some of their evidence, and they were able to resubmit a claim to arrest Lee Jae-yong on increased bribery charges, embezzling even more money, and then also shifting assets overseas and being in violation of hiding criminal proceedings. Essentially, the charge is that he manipulated his position of authority within Samsung Group to use Samsung Group assets, embezzle some of the money, send it over to Soon-sil's foundations in order for Soon-sil to influence the president to say, yay, go for the Samsung merger. Why was the Samsung merger so important? Because if the Samsung merger happened before different conglomerate units in 2015, then Lee Jae-yong becomes the head of the Samsung empire on paper, as well as in hereditary succession. The reason why this is a little complicated, and the reason why Korean people are upset, and a lot of people, including the political parties representing the people, are happy about this case because they see this as a step towards economic justice. The reason why it's economic injustice is that a lot of these conglomerates are family founded, yes, and then they once were family owned. But in this modern day and age, they usually do not own the company. Shareholders own the company. In this case, they might own like 3%, 4%, 5%, and yet they control the entire empire. And most people are like, okay, how's that possible? You don't own this. If you were in charge of your own company, let's say you even own 51% of it, or if you owned 100% of it, you want to employ your cousin, you want to employ your grandma, you want to employ your neighbor down the street who doesn't do anything, fine, you own the company, and good luck to you. But when you are messing around with other people's money, especially investors' money, that's when people start to get a little bit upset. In this case, kind of mirroring like North Korea's family sibling rivalry situation up there, people I do think can look at the corruption, look at the hereditary succession, look at the unfairness of the family controlling the empire even though they don't own it officially on paper. In terms of money, they found another way on paper to own it, but in a weird way. People kind of, I think, have been willing to give it a pass because they see it as stability. because in Korea there is still a need for a top-down chain of command, especially in a large empire. And if you have legitimacy of hereditary succession, that actually does in a way create some stability and order in the chaos. But now as what we're seeing is that in this hyper-globalized modern age may not be the best way to survive. And the reason being is that it's becoming an outmoded form of leadership, because leadership in Korea is a heavy burden that we're seeing, like in this generation of leaders, they're not really equipped to handle. If you have such a top-down hierarchical system where essentially you're like a king or a dictator at the top, a lot depends on your ability and your wisdom and your guidance. And frankly, once you get down to the third generation of handing something over, that person in that position is not always the sharpest tool in the shed, the brightest bulb in the box, or however you want to say it. And so in that case, if you have a distributed management, then that becomes less of a worry because you're hiring the expertise at that point. And if you had retained your ownership shares, then you can lounge on the beach, collect your dividends, let other people work for you. But you see, in this case, what happens if you don't actually own the company? You have to show up in order to control it. And the reason why you want to control it is that you control the budget of the company. So let's say you only own like 3% of the company, but you can control how the money is spent. So if your, sister-in-law has like a cafe, then you install all of her cafes at all of your buildings and branches or whatnot, and you increase the family wealth. If your uncle is running some sort of auto supply parts company, well, you give all the contracts to your uncle-in-law. So you have to show up in order to make money under this system, and that's why family control is so important with these conglomerates. So this is a long way of saying, yes, he's been arrested. Yes, there is a lot of influence peddling, and yes, the stakes are extremely high for the Yi family with Samsung Group in this case. Now, the reason why this might turn into a plus for the prosecutors, and the reason why I do think the court this time moved towards arresting Lee Jae-yong, is that people want to have a quicker finish to this long, drawn-out impeachment trial. Before, I said it was good that he was not arrested because there was not enough time that had passed in the investigation and in the trial to come to a decent ruling. There was one kind of goalpost at the end of January set because one of the Constitutional Court judges retired, and they wanted to make sure there was enough judges in order to make this ruling. Well, March 13th, there's going to be another judge that retires, and that's going to knock down the total number of judges to 7, and you need 6 to impeach. So that really reduces the margin of victory for people who want an impeachment. And so now it looks like there is enough evidence. They're going to close hearings, I believe, next week, and then they're going to take 2 weeks to deliberate, the judges are, and then by March 10th, we may have a ruling, because that's the last working day before the March 13th rolls around, where that one other justice has to leave her position. And so when you have the I called him the chairman. Well, basically, he's the vice chairman, but essentially he's the de facto chairman and heir to the Samsung empire. If you have him in jail, you are delaying a lot of approvals and projects and progress of this conglomerate that essentially contributes at least 25%. I think some estimates say, if you count up everything, at least 40% of Korea's GDP. If you have that person in jail, then you are seriously putting pressure on ending this process. And so I believe that this is very strategically timed and coordinated so that Samsung's buy-in will be there to end the impeachment trial. Now, the reason why I say buy-in, and the reason why I do think that people of all levels of power understand what's really going on, is that in some way, shape, or another, Samsung has probably entered your life in terms of influence. And they even say, you know, they call these monetary gifts to judges as scholarships, Samsung scholarships. And I was like, when I first heard that, I was like, wait, these are judges, so they must have already done all their schooling, and they're definitely judging at the moment. What other thing do they need to study? I hope they don't need to, like, you know, study for a degree that would be related to their job. And so it's just called a scholarship just by name. And so it's already sketchy. So it's very clear that this is shaking up the business community, because there are other conglomerates also under this scrutiny because of approvals that seem to have gotten through because of influence peddling or bribery. And that is also part of, you know, this is a little bit of an aside, when companies try to come and do business here in Korea. I mean, Uber is one case, and most big brands know that you have to partner with a Korean conglomerate, and that's, I think, also a reason why prices are, you know, tacked on, like ratcheted up, because there's also a tack on so many middlemen. But part of that reason is that you gotta pay to play in Korea, and you have to know who needs to pay whom. And sometimes, you know, if you're a total outsider, you don't know. For example, even within Korea, with Korean brands, I believe there was one Korean cosmetics company that is related to how this whole Soon-sil scandal erupted. But they, I believe, wanted to get into a very, I think the #1 duty-free store in Korea, into the chain. And even the placement of where they're at within the physical space of the store requires a bribe. And in this case, it was widely reported, I believe, that, gosh, it was a female. It was either the wife of the chairman or like the daughter of the chairman, or it was essentially like a female relative of the family that runs this particular duty-free chain. And so she received allegedly the bribes in order for this cosmetics company to play at her store. So if you're from overseas, how are you gonna know? Like, this is not even like the company, this is like the female relative. So I think this is a little bit of reason why people are frustrated when they do try to enter the Korean market. On the other hand, I mean, yeah, if you just accept that process, it seems like it becomes very clear, and you definitely will be assured that in some ways you know where your position is in the market, and you know that you can be ahead of other competitors who try to invade this space. So I'm sure all you MBA people, or like, you know, you people who are already in the space, you know, understand this. But for ordinary Korean people, it's just like another case of frustration, where it's like they know the game is rigged and everybody knows what is going on, but they're just letting it happen. And it just continues to chip away at a nation's happiness. The citizens who are able to, you know, their ability to have hope, and it's essentially their determination and, what do you call it, like willpower and just kind of enthusiasm for wanting to contribute to the society. And once you erode that and just totally derail that, then you have a whole dispirited nation. You don't have people like coming up with great products, ideas, and consuming and just being general good citizens. And so this, in a way, is a win for the public. Although, you know, of course, the cynics are saying like, it's just a couple of weeks, nothing's gonna change. But I do believe what has changed is people's strength in their expectations, voiced expectations. and their willingness to fight because they see like there has been, oh wow, Goliath has been knocked down a couple of notches. So we're going to wait and see how long he spends in jail, whether or not this is going to really affect the Soon-sil case, but it looks like the train is moving very quickly. President Park's legal team, she's adding more and more lawyers. There's like a new lawyer every week. Well, that legal team says that it was shocked by the announcement that it looked like, or the impression that the Constitutional Court wants to judge and rule by early March. They say there's not enough time. They got all these witnesses, and the Constitutional Court is not having it. They're saying, just send us your written testimony, and we'll just, leave it at that. And so it looks like President Park's legal team is going to be under a huge time crunch, and the evidence gathering for the prosecution team, remember, has started way in advance with the National Assembly hearings. So they are on a very measured course. Of course, they also have a bit of a time crunch, but they've been working very steadily, very diligently, and very aggressively for months now. All right, so that's your Friday update. Thanks so much for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you again. Bye-bye.